Now, you've met them before, okay? The person who walks into a room and instantly draws people in. Think Anthony Bourdain. Even on a TV screen, he had that magnetism. He had people hanging on to his every word. He wasn't the richest, the smartest, or the most powerful, but he had this way of making every conversation feel exciting. And he could do that with anyone. A world-class chef in Tokyo, a bartender in a rundown dive bar, the American president in a small pho restaurant in Hanoi. They all leaned in closer when he spoke. He was effortlessly interesting. So what's the difference, okay? Why do some people walk into a room and instantly draw people in, while others fade into the background? Are you born with it? Or can you learn it? The people who leave an impact understand something deeper, and we can learn a lot from them, okay? The first thing you need to do is to throw out everything you think you know about what it takes to be an interesting person. We're starting from scratch here today, all right? Let's go. Welcome to Alux, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. So, the first rule of being interesting is to stop trying so hard. Because, okay, look, here's a riddle for you. Two friends both have dates lined up on the same night at the same nice restaurant. They sit far away from each other, but they can still see each other. The first one's date walks up and he's dressed to impress and dripping in the strong smell of cologne. He sits down and immediately starts talking about his business, how he had to fire somebody that day. Then he moves on to his thoughts and opinions about pay structures, unions, and employees, and then he talks about his upcoming holiday. He shares details of his life to seem relatable. But they're level 4 types of details, and he's only 30 minutes into this conversation. There's a scattiness, a forced energy, like he really needs this date to like him. And that neediness, it sets off an alarm. Why is he trying so hard? What is he overcompensating for? The woman looks across at her friend's table, but over there, her date walks in, smiles warmly, and asks about her day. He listens when she speaks and he shares when it's his turn. He doesn't rush to fill any silences. And even though he talks, he doesn't give everything away. There's room for curiosity and questions. He builds intrigue instead of dumping his whole life story on his date. He doesn't scramble for attention. It just comes to him. So who do you think is gonna go on a second date? Friend number 1 or friend number 2? This same exact thing happens in social settings all the time. There's this idea that interesting people are captivating because they've done so many cool things and everybody knows about it. Or that you're an interesting person when you can fill the silence because you have a lot to say. But that's just not true. The person who overshares, over-explains, and dominates conversations isn't pulling people in, they're pushing them away. You think you're building interest, but what you're really doing is making people uncomfortable. You're trying so hard to be noticed, and the desperation is off-putting. And don't blame nerves, okay? You have to get them back in check before you leave the house. Besides, if you're that nervous, it's better for everyone, including yourself, just to be quiet and listen. Once you've mastered that, then you can work on creating space for attention to come to you. And you do that in 2 ways. Pay attention to someone that you consider interesting, okay? And watch how they have mastered selective presence. They don't flood conversations with endless stories about themselves. They listen with their full attention. They ask sharp questions that relate to the story. This immediately tells someone that they're intelligent because they can follow a story and they can want to fill in some gaps. Next, they build intrigue. They don't rush to prove their worth in every conversation. They share just enough to make everyone curious, but never too much that there's nothing left to discover. It's the difference between someone like Ryan Gosling, who speaks with those perfect, thoughtful pauses that gives every word weight, and Jimmy Fallon, who fills the seconds with exaggerated reactions and forced energy. Fallon is entertaining, sure, but his constant need to be on can feel exhausting. Someone like Gosling doesn't push. He makes you lean in. Trying too hard to be interesting has the opposite effect. You need a lot less, but do it better. Once you stop fighting for attention, then you can focus on the thing that actually holds it: storytelling. So the second rule is to have stories, not just opinions. Shall we try another quick riddle here? Okay, so just imagine this. Two people are talking about their travels. One says, "I visited Japan once. It was great." It's a fact. It's true. It's also really forgettable. The second person says, "This one time in Tokyo, I got lost in a tiny alley. It was late at night and I thought everything was closed. But there was this little hidden ramen shop that was open, and honestly, I had the best meal of my life there. The chef didn't speak a word of English, but he convinced me to try something I never would have ordered. He was funny and sweet. I still have no idea what I ate, but it was incredible." Yeah, person number two, they just took you to Japan with them. You had that experience with them. That's the difference between a fact and a story. Most people communicate in dry statements. "I had a nice meal. That event was fun. I work in finance." There's nothing that feels alive in any of those words. You're not invited into that experience at all. And do you see the difference in how one makes you feel a part of something while the other one just makes you feel like slowly fading away? It doesn't even have anything to do with the story. And the most ordinary experiences can be fascinating if they're framed well. Give them vivid details, unexpected twists, and emotion. Here's a simple 3-step formula to instantly improve how you tell stories. So first of all, set up the context. Where were you? What was happening? Then, the unexpected moment, the funny, weird, or surprising thing that happened. And third, the takeaway or reaction. What did you learn? How did it end? Small tweaks make your stories more exciting. If you want to be interesting, don't just say things. Make people experience them. All right, now moving on to the third rule. Make other people feel interesting too. Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, "Wow, that person is really cool"? And then you go and tell somebody else about them and they ask, "Well, what was cool about them?" And you can't really answer that because they didn't say a whole lot. There was just something about the way they interacted that made you feel good. Well, these people are masters at mirroring, and that gives them the ability to make people around them feel more interesting. And it goes beyond just asking good questions. They reacted at the right moment in the right way to what you were saying. They guided the conversation without you even realizing it. And most of all, they made you feel like your words mattered. Passive listening, just waiting for your turn to speak and interrupting, those are the enemies of being memorable. Truly magnetic people are able to make the other person feel like they're unlocking a hidden part of themselves. And they do this in a few ways. First, they mirror intensity. When somebody is excited about something, they match that energy. If someone is deep in thought, they slow down to meet them there. Conversations feel more natural because they shift with the flow of the moment. Second, they introduce a new perspective. So instead of just agreeing or nodding, they add something that widens the conversation. Like, "You know what? That reminds me of," or "I never thought about it like that before, but..." They keep that conversation from dying out. Third, they also challenge just enough. Because the best conversations aren't agreement loops, they make people think. If somebody says, "I always do things this way," an interesting person usually asks, "Well, have you ever tried it the opposite way?" They don't ask in any kind of aggressive fashion. It's not a gotcha moment. It's really just something they want to know about you. And because it's said like that, it actually makes you pause and think. Fourth, they make people feel like experts. Because people love explaining things, especially when they really enjoy the topic. Even if they know all about the topic, they don't know everything, but they want to, and maybe you can help them. That gives others a chance to step into the role of storyteller. And fifth, they push you to go deeper. If you say you had an amazing trip, they ask, "What made it stand out from every other trip you've taken?" Anything that is surface level can be turned into something deeper and more real. You don't make people like you by agreeing with everything they say. You make them like you by making them feel alive. If you make them feel like their best self, they'll want to come back to you. All right, so this formula is now starting to take shape, but there's one thing missing: how you get your stories. Because that's going to make you curious enough to listen to, fascinating enough to take them on the experience, and relatable enough to connect with them. Which brings us to our fourth rule here. If you want to be unforgettable, you need to live in a way that gives you something to talk about. You need material for your conversations, and you get that by going out into the world and enjoying it, living your life. You have to create the experiences worth sharing. They're not going to come to you. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go skydiving or backpacking across countries to be captivating, but you do have to make an effort to experience what the world offers on a big and small scale. Follow the rabbit holes that spark your curiosity. There's always going to be a story to tell when you do that. Anthony Bourdain didn't sit in a room reading about food culture. He immersed himself in it. Every meal, every conversation, every small detour became a part of a bigger story. He was living the things he was describing. And because he lived that way, every conversation he had felt like an open door into a world that you wanted to step into. If you don't do anything new or go beyond your routine, you're going to struggle to be interesting at all, because what would you have to talk about? These people create conversations before they even start talking. They collect experiences. They don't just read about things, they do them. They try new foods, they pick up new skills for the fun of it. They throw themselves into unfamiliar environments. Most importantly, they don't do it to impress anybody. They do it for themselves. They also follow curiosity. They find a street musician and ask about their work and how they got there. They take a different route home just to see what's there, and they go to an event just because it sounds like something they haven't done before. And they embrace the art of participation. Instead of just consuming content, they become a part of it. Watching a documentary on Japanese calligraphy is fun, but it's even more fun when you try that calligraphy yourself. They raise their hand to play the game, even if they don't know how it works. Let go of feeling embarrassed because you might not be good at something. You'll survive, okay? In fact, you'll thrive as a result. You don't have to be the most well-traveled, well-read, or naturally charismatic person in the room, okay? But if you engage with the world in a way that sparks your own curiosity, you'll never run out of things to talk about. And that will make your conversations feel effortless. When you live with a sense of curiosity, it shows, and people can't help but be drawn to that. Being interesting is far more about how you live than it is about how much you talk. So we've got a challenge for you. For the next 7 days, do something different every day. Take a new route. Try a new food. Start a conversation with a stranger. Pay attention to what stands out. See how quickly your world and conversations start to change. If you do this for a week, you'll probably have a story worth telling by the end of it. Try out some micro-adventures. Go to a part of your city you've never been to before. Try a food you've never heard of. Say yes to something spontaneous. Engage with the world around you. Don't just watch. You have to participate, okay? So instead of just listening to music, learn a simple instrument or learn to sing a song. Instead of just watching sports, go to a live event. And create a 7-day challenge for yourself, okay? Try something new every single day. Like ordering a meal that you normally wouldn't. It'll give you something to talk about. And as a bonus here for you today, have your own way of seeing the world. Now, this one is a bit of a level up on the interesting scale. It takes some practice to get there. Think of the most interesting people you know. They're not just repeating what's popular. They have their own lens, their own philosophy, their own way of seeing the world. That doesn't mean you have to be controversial for the sake of it, but it does mean you need conviction. The best conversations happen when people feel like they're talking to someone who actually thinks for themselves, someone who's processed their experiences and shaped their own ideas. Imagine two people talking about food. One says, "Yeah, sushi's really popular these days." The other one says, "I love sushi, but I actually think ramen is more interesting. There's something about how each bowl tells the story of the chef who made it." One talks about a trend. The other one turns it into a personal philosophy, and that sparks curiosity and debate. So here's how to build this skill. Take time to reflect on why you think the way you do. Where does it come from? Don't just consume content. Challenge it. Look into it more. And develop strong tastes, not just in food, but in life. Know what excites you, what moves you, and why. The most interesting people don't just tell great stories, they make you see the world in a new way. Being interesting has nothing to do with how rich or successful you are. It's all about how you interact with the world and the people in it. That's the difference between the person everyone forgets and the one they can't stop thinking about. Bring life into a room and nobody will forget you. And if you feel like you could use some help in that department, within the Alux app, we've got a collection called Communicating for Influence, designed to have you captivating rooms and drawing people in with your conversations. If you download the app and scan this QR code on screen, you'll score 25% off the annual membership. Between the daily coaching sessions, expert learning packs, and daily reflections and journaling, you'll always have something captivating to say. I'll see you on the inside.